All right, so Walt Whitman. And we're going to go back to the beginning here. Walt Whitman is often called America's poet because he really became the first one to capture what the American essence was, what the dream was, and also the people, and create a new, unique way of writing versus living with the old style of writing. He was born in May of 1819 in Long Island. He wasn't poor. He wasn't really rich. They were part of that new emerging middle class that's coming through in the 1800s, where people are making enough to be comfortable, but they aren't exactly the wealthy class, but they're not really poor either. He's second child of 8, and later he begins to work as a printer's apprentice in 1835 as a school teacher. So both ends of the writing scale, from printing it to teaching it. And then in 1844, he worked for several different newspapers. He wrote short fiction pieces, and he borrowed a lot of techniques from Poe and Hawthorne during this time, a little dark and edgy and very descriptive, brings you into the writing really, really well. He then later becomes the chief and editor of the Brooklyn Eagle and holds that post for 2 years. However, he then gets fired because he doesn't agree with his boss, who is not necessarily a slaveholder, but it doesn't disagree with the expansion of slavery either. He's a little more on the racist end of things. Having been raised by Quaker parents and followers of Thomas Paine and people who were abolitionists and things like that, he pretty much was not going to work for someone who dealt that way anyway. And he then writes what we call pulp fiction. No, this is not the movie. He writes what's a couple pieces, one called the Franklin Evans novel and things like that. Mysteries, kind of worlds of, the world that they're living in at the time. He also writes a temperance novel at this time. Now, the temperance movement was basically prohibition, preaching by the women's movement and people who were against drinking of alcohol during this time, because they thought that it created crime, it led to crime, which in some ways did. As women especially were opposed to the abuse that happened of other women and in the homes because of drinking, and people not holding their jobs or taking care of their families because of it. This sold 20,000 copies, which is more than anything else he ever did at the time. And 20,000 copies during the 1800s was pretty good, actually. He then moves down to New Orleans, where he sees slavery and the slave markets, becomes horrified by it, and really takes on the abolitionist movement that moment. He also likes to go out in nature and live with oaks and with moss, experiences the swampy mess that is the New Orleans area. Remember, the New Orleans area at this point is newly coming into the United States, had been owned by Napoleon, and was given to us or sold to us shortly after. And so the new slavery views in the New Orleans was very different, because before then they were open in their relationships, open with having African American women and children with more equal rights and things, and then it was suddenly taken away from them. So you're getting a mix of people who were conflicted about it, who once thought it was okay to be equal and to treat them better, and now suddenly can't, along with the new slave trade coming in. It's a pretty conflicted time there, but he falls in love with the French language and the culture there in New Orleans and uses it quite a bit later. He loves Italian opera. He would never have written Leaves of Grass. It becomes this epic thing where it lulls, it goes along, and then suddenly bursts of energy come out, bursts of beauty and language. And so it's very much operatic in that way. Interestingly enough, his favorite actor was Junius Brutus Booth, who he saw play in Shakespeare, and then later his son, John Wilkes Booth, kills Abraham Lincoln, who is Walt Whitman's muse, I would say, someone who he really looks up to as a father figure for this country and admires greatly. So very ironic in that case. He also really loves the Bible, although not a church-going man himself, even though he doesn't particularly give into religion itself. He does love the Bible and the things that has there. And then Thomas Carlyle's Senator Restoris, which I really have no clue what that is. Emerson was a huge influence and impact, and he says here, Emerson helped Whitman to find himself. I was simmering, and Emerson brought me to a boil. It's like Walt Whitman found himself almost there, doubting himself, not quite ready to meet the world, just about ready to go. And then when he met Emerson, when he read Emerson, he was able to come into himself, that self-reliance, that finding who you really are in it. He was literary acquaintances with Edgar Allan Poe, William Cullen Bryant, Amos Bronson Alcott, who was the father to Louisa May Alcott, and Henry David Thoreau, all of these people that were the transcendentalists we've talked about, abolitionists, people who were really into there, and even that little darker side of the Gothic coming through too with that. He was also very into phrenology, which was nothing new at this time. Most people had this happen. It was like reading your palms, but they'd feel the bumps on your head and determine what your personality is, maybe read your future, tell who you are based on that. And for him, he said it revealed his character of sympathy, sublimity, and self-esteem, along with a dangerous fault of indolence, which is kind of rebellion and sarcasm, hitting back at things. In a section of Song of Myself, he talks about how he feels the pain and the torture of being different and of suffering through things, of not being closed off. He's very honest and open about the beauty of nature and of the human body being natural, and people were scared of that, and it was very different, and kind of the puritanistic values about the body and sex and things like that were still very limited and closed doors and taboo topics, but he was very open. But he took that persecution and revealed kindness behind it. He never condemned anyone. He never was mean about things. And his friend Dr. Maurice Buck called this the Christ likeness, where the poet, seer, person sees things in the world that nobody else can and brings them to light and might be persecuted for it. He writes even about this later in a poem, Leaves of Grass, called I Am the Man I Suffered, I Was There. Very much that relating himself to Christ, which again people didn't like, but for him it was what he needed to do. And then he writes a collection of poems, at least 12, including Song of Myself, and then I Sing the Body Electric. This was one where people really had a problem with because he was very open about who he was and what other people were, and this idea of being sensual human beings, etc., and the Sleepers. And only 795 copies were printed of this, and the family says, and we can't verify this, that he actually helped to set the type, even as, remember, he worked as a printer's apprentice, so this would be something believable, but we don't know for sure on that. In Leaves of Grass, interestingly enough, we always refer to the grass, but we never look at what makes up the grass. The grass itself isn't one thing. It's made up of individual blades that are unique and part of things. And so, again, unabashed about who he is as a person, not caring about things. He talks about himself in his own poem. He says, Walt Whitman, an American, one of the roughs, a cosmos. In that and of itself, the cosmos is a universe, a world of its own, and he says we're unique in our own little worlds and things, disorderly, fleshy, and sensual eating, drinking, and breeding, no sentimentalist, that we're messy people, that humans aren't perfect, that we have all these different parts about us. And then no stander above men and women or apart from them, no more modest than immodest. Whoever degrades another degrades me, and whatever is done or said returns at last to me, and whatever I do or say, I also return. I'm going to stop here and have you read something, or not read something. We're not going to stop. I'm just going to move on. What is he? I want you to think to yourself, what is he saying about how he feels about his relationship with other people and how we should treat each other in our world? Especially when he says here, no stander above men and women or apart from them. no more modest than immodest. This idea of equality and being who we are and not putting ourselves above, but not lower than anyone else either, that we're all just people. And then when whoever degrades another degrades me, that by hurting someone else, you hurt everyone, including yourself. And whatever is done or said returns to other people. That the idea of paying it forward, of passing it on, happens and makes things change as they go. And whatever you do has an impact on things as well to other people in your world. His themes deal with this transcendental power of love, brotherhood, this platonic relationship with each other that we have, that we are basically brothers and sisters in humanity. To project ourselves into others' lives, not just to write a story from another point of view, but actually imagine yourself in their shoes and to put yourselves in their situations and try to understand them from that point of view. He had a huge optimistic faith in democracy and where our country was headed. He thought that nature was very regenerative and healing, that it was a part of us and we were part of it, and that it could teach us so much about life. And he also felt that the body and the soul were one thing. They weren't two separate things. Again, that transcendentalist romantic point of view that we are not bad or evil and we're not separate things, but that we're together as one thing, and that body and sexuality are just part of that natural process, and that we are who we are, and we shouldn't be ashamed of those things. His techniques that he creates are different from everything else out there. He pretty much becomes the free verse, where you don't have set meter in things, but we don't have a way of just forming and conforming to society. He does use it, but he does it for a purpose when he does. He doesn't set rhymes or anything else. He also uses a lot of images and symbols and phrases repeated to bring us back to the ideas he's putting in. Enumerations and catalogs. This is a huge thing where we just list things. He's very much into it. It's much of a time. Darwinism is coming out at this time as well. We're just listing things. It's a part of our society to catalog and label and put ourselves into lists. He uses a lot of anaphora, the initial repetition in lines, and each line is hanging by a loop from the line before it, that we continue the ideas. We don't just stop at the end of lines, but we continue ideas from before. And then Whitman envelope, where things happen beforehand, and kind of like book-ending things. He starts us out with an idea, lists and does all these things, and he ends with it and pulls it all together for us in a really nice way. So some examples of this anaphora and this parallelism and imagery and techniques that he's using in here is from Song of Myself. It says, where the heifers browse and the geese nip their food with short jerks, where the sundown shadows lengthen over the limitless and lonesome prairie, where the herds of buffalo make a crawling spread of the square miles far and near, where the hummingbird shimmers, where the neck of the long-lived swan is curving and winding, where the laughing gull scoots by the slappy shore and laughs her near-human laugh. He doesn't just use parallelism here, where the, to keep us stuck in the moment, to see everything that's there, to bring us back to what's actually happening. But he also chooses really powerful words to create images, to create those ideas in our heads, the sounds of the words, the slappy shore and laughs her near human laugh, curving and winding, the long-lived swan. He really has a way of using powerful words to create images for us in these ideas. So he's very idiosyncratic. He doesn't use always normal spelling or punctuation, and this is, again, to make it purposeful, to help us think about things, to make us stop, to reflect on why these are happening and the message he's trying to get across. Choosing words for language and sound, uses foreign languages. Also takes things from all different disciplines, whether it's English or medicine or science or music. He does it all. He loves to compare nature, again, to human existence, to list those things out and show the commonality between all things. He loves the businesses and professions of the common people, military and war terms. He just pretty much is, again, that American poet. He brings all diversity, all things from all areas into one idea, into one poem, to show how we are the same but different, and that's okay at the same time. Ralph Waldo Emerson himself said after, I mean, he's a mentor, he's written his own stuff, but he says this of Walt Whitman. He finds the Leaves of Grass the most extraordinary piece of wit and wisdom that America has yet contributed. I greet you at the beginning of a great career, which must have had a long foreground somewhere for such a start. That before he started writing, so many experiences, so many things have prepared him, whether it's talent, soul, spirit, whatever it is, it's helped him to do this. So now you're going to move on to the next assignments that you're going to follow along with the textbook and do in here as you go.